Hello and welcome to this lecture on proposal arguments. This will prepare you for your final critical essay of this semester, and we'll also talk about how to effectively use research to complete this assignment. So, first of all, what is a proposal argument? When you write a proposal argument, you are pushing for some sort of action. You're answering the question, what should be done about this problem? Proposal arguments often tackle policy issues because you might be arguing to change or implement a policy to solve a particular problem. So, think all the way back to your evaluation essay and even your causal essay, that problem that you have been working with, whatever you evaluated, right? Now you're going to try to solve that problem. Um, so the validity of the causal argument is going to help you support the proposal. Um, a lot of times when we look at the history of a problem, we are looking at how this problem maybe has been solved in the past or people have tried to solve it in the past. And so you can use things from the causal argument to help push forward your proposal argument. So, what you'll do is you'll focus on the future and you're going to offer a specific solution. So, here are some examples of what I would consider like proposal thesis statements, right? These are the arguments that you can make based on your particular topic. So, number one is about social media. To limit the spread of misinformation, social media platforms should require users to complete a brief media literacy tutorial before sharing political content because this step improves users' ability to evaluate sources. So we have our problem, right? This idea of media literacy and misinformation, right? Then we have a policy that we want to implement, right? Um, a tutorial on social media platforms, and then why this would be effective. So, this would be what I would consider a strong thesis statement. The next one is on AI. So it says universities should require instructors to include transparent AI use guidelines in every syllabus because clear expectations reduce plagiarism, confusion, and support ethical student use of AI tools. Right? So, again, this is another policy that we want to implement across universities, or we could even say community colleges, right? Whatever that looks like. The last one is on fast fashion, which I think is an interesting topic. So, to reduce textile waste, cities should offer monthly clothing repair workshops because accessible repair skills extend the life of garments and decrease the landfill volume. So, what you'll see in all of these arguments is you have your topic, you have your proposed solution, and then why that solution will be effective. So, your textbook talks about what you should include in a proposal argument, right? So, you would start with your introduction, and that's where that thesis statement would appear, right? Then, in your next body paragraph, you would talk about the background on the problem, maybe an opportunity to solve the problem, or a situation about the problem, right? So you're giving kind of like context, background information. The next body paragraph, you would describe the proposed solution. And this is where you would use the elements of a definitional argument that we've studied in previous modules. Next body paragraph, or maybe multiple body paragraphs, you would talk about methods, right? How do we go about solving this problem? And then the next one is very, very important, right? We don't have unlimited time, resources, people, right? Is the feasibility of the project. So you have to answer this question. How can enough time, money, and will, right? Are we going to get people who are going to want to do this be found to make it happen? Have similar proposals been carried out successfully in the past, right? This is kind of going back to the causal essay as well, potentially, right? You may have talked about that in your causal essay. And then the benefits of the proposal. Again, this is using a causal argument. You probably didn't talk about this in your causal essay in this class, but you'll use that type of causal argument to show the benefits of the proposal. You could even say it's evaluative, right? It's strong because XYZ. Okay. So when you guys go to draft and plan for your proposal arguments, these are the elements that you should be including in your essay, right? All of these things need to be there. And you really want it to be reasonable, right? Is this something that can actually happen? And so you're going to have to rely very heavily on research because we're not necessarily experts in these fields yet. Maybe you are, but many of us, topics that we've chosen, we're not experts yet. We're not doing field work, right? So we have to rely on the people who have gone out and done the field work. Okay. Now, when you write a proposal argument, you really need to consider your audience. Who are you trying to convince to implement this policy or this change, right? Who has the authority, the resources, the influence, right? Think about people like college administrators, local community or city offices, institutions, organizations, or even professional or workplace audiences, right? Think about what type of appeals might be more effective in persuading them to follow the proposed advice, right? The example that your textbook is like, if you're trying to convince a bunch of businessmen, are they going to be like super swayed emotionally, right? So is pathos going to be the best appeal? Pathos going to be the best appeal to use, or is it going to be logic, right? So really think about who your target audience is. And you got to convince them that your idea is worth it. Ultimately, at the end, you want to leave them with this lasting impression like, yes, we can do this, we can make this change, right? So, as I mentioned, you are going to be relying heavily on research. So, Chapter 6 of the textbook talks about how to use research in your arguments, right? So there are different types of sources that you could use. And this kind of gives us a hierarchy, right? The first tier or the best of the best sources should be peer reviewed academic publications, right? That's where you should start. Really, like use the Coastline Library. That this is where you should start with your research, because the content of peer-reviewed academic publications, it has like rigorous research and analysis. This is like hardcore research, right? There are going to be strong evidence, there are going to be references to other high quality sources, right? So the library, Google Scholar, right? Academic article databases, you can, kind of start there. I would say use the Coastline Library and use that database. Okay, the next tier, so like right below these academic publications would be like reports, articles, books from credible non-academic sources, right? These can still be well researched. Or even handed descriptions of an event of the state of the world, right? We can probably still trust them. Um, and so these initial research on events or trends are not yet analyzed in academic literature, but they could potentially lead you to other academic sources that you can also use, right? So you would go to like websites of relevant agencies, Google searches like .gov, .org, maybe even .edu, right? Something like that. And then the third tier, right? We probably shouldn't be using too many of these short pieces from newspapers or credible websites, because these just have like simple reporting of events, research findings, policy changes. It's not really in depth. Now, these can be helpful because you can like start here to help it lead you to other more credible and vetted sources. But you really have to understand how to do like strong Google searches, or use article databases for newspapers and magazines. So you still have to, have that like research skill. Okay. And then finally, tier four, we really shouldn't be using these at all. These are agenda driven or uncertain pieces, like highly opinionated, varying in thoughtfulness and credibility. Think like, random blogs, like anyone could post on the internet, right? Those TikTok influencers or social media influencers that you see that, all of a sudden think that they're an expert, but they don't really have anything to back up what they're saying, right? Now, it could represent, a particular position within a debate. It could give you keywords or clues, but that should lead you to like better sources, right? The majority of what I want to see you guys use is these academic publications, peer reviewed. They've been highly vetted. They're very credible, rigorous, methods have gone into doing these studies and things. So really, really try to like focus on tier one and two, and then use tier three and four to sort of like get you started. Now, if you feel a little bit intimidated by using academic journals because of the language or things like that, here are some tips for you. First, read the abstract, right? This is like the little summary before you even click on the full text of the article. Read the abstract to find out if it's relevant to your topic, right? Don't waste your time reading a 30-page journal article that actually has nothing to do with what you're writing about. The abstract will tell you if it is credible. And oftentimes in, library databases, when you like click on an article, it'll have specific keywords. And so you can kind of go through those keywords. It'll show you the abstract just to make sure it's what you're looking for. Try to read strategically. You don't need to understand everything, right? And that's okay because we're not necessarily experts in these fields, and it might use a lot of jargon that we're unfamiliar with, and that's okay. So use some good like study reading techniques where you kind of look for keywords and things like that, and try to find the things that you do understand. Okay. Don't worry about the technical stuff, right? When it talks about research methods and things like that, in an academic journal, we're going to accept those findings as legitimate because they have been peer reviewed, meaning other people in this field who didn't participate in the reading or the writings or the research of this study, they vetted all of this. And so we can trust that it's going to be credible. And once you start doing some research in academic journals, it'll help you to find others because um, good scholars are going to cite their sources, right? Which is what you guys should be doing. And so they'll cite their sources. You can go to their reference list or their works cited page and find other credible people in the field, credible studies that you can use. And then you'll start to see names and things like being repeated, which is always fun. Fun for me. So I encourage you guys to go out and use those academic sources as you prepare to write your proposals.